Hi, welcome back to Books on the Go. I'm Anna and I'm here with an August wrap up. And actually July, August, because I think that's how long it's been. I was away for most of July and I did read quite a few books on holidays. Most of them I don't have with me, but I think two of these are from the holiday reading, if not possibly three. And then we come to a very long book which dominated most of my month of August. So let's get into it. The first one is The Notary, and this is by Alexandros Rangavis, translated by Simon Darragh. And it's a lovely short novel. I think I bought this in Athens when we were in Athens in April, but I hadn't got around to it until just now reading it. Alexandros Rangavis, who I hadn't heard of before, but he sounds like a very interesting man. This is an 1800s book. He was living in the 1800s and he was the foreign minister of Greece. He helped found the University of Athens, and then he was ambassador to the United States, among other things. He wrote I think, history of modern Greek literature, so he just fitted quite a lot in, and wrote this short novel, The Notary, which is a great read. It's very spare economical prose, which you know that I like, and it's an interesting story. It's set on Kefalonia, which is an island in the Ionian Islands and has its own interesting history, and the history is really very much just a backdrop of this novel, but it does give it a richness and a flavour that you can tell he has that knowledge of it, and he just gives you a few details of it, and there's a note before, I think a foreword or a note afterwards about that. And there was a revolution that happened in 1830 something, I want to say. However, the story is mainly about a notary who is there to sign or witness a will, and a count dies, and it's what happens to his estate. And the notary is scheming to protect his daughter, or as he thinks, protect his daughter and manipulate her situation and who she marries and who she is not going to marry, but he does that in a scheming way. And it is a crime novel, so there is a death and there's a mystery surrounding that, but it's really beautifully done, very as I said, spare and clean prose, well translated. So I recommend that. It's a nice, if you're wanting something, you know, in terms of translated literature, or going to Greece on holiday and you want a destination read, The Notary is good and very easy to travel with. It's nice and small. Next up, I won't spend too long on this because there's a whole separate video coming, The Late Americans by Brandon Taylor. And when I say video, what happened was Annie and I recorded an episode of the podcast on this, and we were on Zoom because Annie's now at home with baby Otto, who also appears in the video, and I haven't edited it yet. The podcast episode I have, but the video I just want to edit a little bit. So that will be up soon, and there's a whole discussion on The Late Americans. We love Brandon Taylor. I really adored this. I just kept wanting to get back to it. It's set in I think, Iowa City, so a university town. I think it's not a campus novel, in the sense that they're in their 20s, these characters, and it's, I think, campus adjacent. But certainly some of them are studying dance and some of them are studying poetry, so there is a campus element. And you know, I don't normally get on with university novels, but I absolutely loved it. I loved Real Life by Brandon Taylor and Filthy Animals, his short story collection. And this, I think, is even more accomplished. It's rich, it's just intimate. You get these really beautiful, intimate, fly-on-the-wall details of the characters' lives, their relationships, the dynamics between them as they navigate the big questions. So it's sort of, the scale is large but also small, and I really love how he navigates that, and just the sensibility of it. And there's something comforting about his writing. I don't know if I can put my finger on what it is, but maybe I did. I can't remember now when we discussed it on the Books on the Go podcast. So hopefully we were able to shed some light on it, but really loved it. If you haven't picked it up yet, I can recommend. That's The Late Americans by Brandon Taylor. Then a book that Brandon Taylor blurbed by Emma Cline, The Guest, and Brandon Taylor said an astonishingly gifted stylist. So Emma Cline is a young American author who wrote The Girls, was her debut a few years ago, and it was a huge buzzy debut, which I didn't read in the end, but I felt as if I did, which was about the Manson cult. And this is her new novel, and I think she wrote The Daddy, something about the daddy since then. And The Guest is about a young woman called Alex who is staying with her boyfriend or an older man, a client indeed, at Long Island, and she offends him or has a misstep at a party, and so he says, look, I think it's really time for you to leave. And we know from the beginning she's really there, but in fact has nowhere else to go, even though she's supposedly just staying there as his guest and just to hang out with him a bit during the summer. In fact, she doesn't have any other options and she's sort of homeless. And so she then wanders around and doesn't know what to do. He thinks she's going home back to New York, and she thinks perhaps I'll stay until his big party on Labor Day, and I'm sure he'll come round, it will all be fine, I can talk him round. And she's confident in her abilities to do that. At the same time, and this is what makes it such a compelling read, she's an unreliable narrator, because we know that she's sort of lying. She's certainly lying to him and to the other characters, but she's almost lying to herself about whether she really has a grip on her situation. She's also trying to I think she takes pills in between that as well. So of course that degenerates into making her more unreliable and a bit more into a dream state, almost a sort of foggy or hazy state of mind. And so that is one of the things that I think makes it really tense and compelling, because you don't quite trust what she's saying or her impression of the events. It's all from her point of view. And then she goes through and stays at different people's houses, and so you get this sort of slice of life in the Hamptons and the wealthy, privileged people who are staying there, but also from her point of view, which is she's not of that world. And I think someone has compared it to Swimming Pool by, is it John Cheever who wrote the Swimming Pool one, where he goes from swimming pool to swimming pool, but it's actually his descent into alcoholism. I could have that slightly wrong, but I think that I read that somewhere in a review, and it does have that sense about it. We did it for book club, and we all really, really found it unputdownable and really engaging. It is beautifully written. Brandon Taylor's right, beautifully styled. However, as you might have heard if you've seen other reviews, we weren't convinced by the ending. And there was an article saying that the ending is deliberately ambiguous and we're meant to be left wondering, because the whole book is that we're not really sure what's happening. Is she just in this hazy state the whole way along? And the ending is of a piece with that. But I just found it unsatisfying, and we sort of agreed. We were on this, this very tense build-up, which she does so well, and then you sort of want the payoff at the end. And I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't say any more, but I'd love to know your thoughts if you've read it. What did you think of the ending? But a really good read, and as I said, so well paced and with such good narrative tension, I couldn't put it down. That's The Guest. And then on to our big blockbuster for August, which is Middlemarch by George Elliot. And I really don't think I can sum this up in this video. It almost needs a separate video, but I absolutely loved it. We're doing it for the Adelaide Writers Week book club with Louise Adler, the director of Adelaide Writers Week. It was Louise's suggestion. I just gleefully agreed to it. I had no idea that it was 880 pages long. So then I bought it and realised what I'd got myself into, and I'm hosting this next week. So I need to really gather my thoughts and get some good questions together for the group. But that would be really interesting to see what others thought of it. I really loved it, and just trying to maybe mention a few things that I loved is one is her portrait of marriage and various marriages, and her incredible insight into the dynamics of a marriage, that how the dynamics can change, as in you might go into it with all this hope and expectation, and particularly in these days in the 1800s, where you don't live together beforehand, sort of an impression that might not be quite realistic of your husband or wife. And there are some just incredibly perceptive scenes where she gives you just these small details, but it's enough to convey everything about how unsatisfying this particular husband might be. And in particular, Dorothea and her husband, Mr. Corzabon, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. I don't want to give any spoilers, but suffice to say, she marries this older man who is not entirely the best husband, and that is portrayed in such a perceptive way, and in a way that I also found quite witty or quite funny, because I think the author is really dismissing him as this dud husband, and it's beautifully depicted from Dorothea's point of view. But she does also give you Mr. Corzabon's point of view. She says, look at it from his side. You know, can't you see how in his experience he's doing the best he can, and he feels hard done by, and this sort of thing. So there's this wonderful sense of fairness, but even that is quite funny, because she's sort of doing it, but she really understands that he's hard to sympathise with. And there's just a very immersive, rich feel to the book. So I was completely in the world of small town Middlemarch. It is a study of provincial life, I think is the subtitle. And it is, you really feel like you're there. The characters are so well drawn. And also it's very much gives you that sense of the time, and the horse-drawn carriages and all of those, the manners and the mores of the day. But some of the dynamics, the human relationships, are easily, you could imagine them in the modern world. So in that sense, it's very timeless, I think. But you don't need me to tell you that, because that's why it's a classic. So really loved it. It's very worth the 880 pages if you haven't read it yet. And I might or might not do a separate video. I think I might do a review on my blog, which is a real throwback. But sometimes with a book like this, you feel like you need to really do a proper review. So that's Middlemarch by George Elliot, and very hard to know what to follow that up with. And I think I had a bit of a book hangover, but I started reading Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens by Shankari Chandran. And this is a book I really want to love, because it's had rave reviews. I think it won the Miles Franklin, and normally I do read the Miles Franklin winner, which is the Australian Literature Award. It is an author who I have heard great things about, and Room to Read, which is a non-profit that we support, did a wonderful interview with Shankari Chandran. Jacqueline from 6 Minutes for Me did a very thoughtful review, which really made me want to read it. And as she pointed out, and others have pointed out as well, the cover doesn't reflect the type of book it is. It's quite a serious book. And when I say serious, it's quite a proper literary fiction addressing serious issues, including racism in Australia from a Sri Lankan refugee or Sri Lankan migrant point of view, whereas the cover makes it look like a cosy retirement village story. And that even the title, I think, doesn't really do it justice in that sense. But anyhow, I started it. It starts from the point of view of Maya, I think it is, Maya, who runs a retirement village in Sydney. And I put it down, I got to about page 15 or 20, and I was finding it quite what's the word? I wasn't loving it. I was finding that it was giving me a lot of detail. It was quite slow paced. As I said, not very fair to read this straight after Middlemarch because I think it's a debut novel, but quite slow paced and just spelling everything out. So, for example, she goes back in time. We start at the retirement village, but then we go back to how they came to buy and build the retirement village, or they bought the building and renovated it to become a retirement village, which I was sort of thinking, I don't really need that detail. I'm happy to accept that they came in the 1980s, they bought the building with their friend Cedric, and off we go. I don't need to know brick by brick how they built it, but here we are. So she says, her husband says to her, according to this book, we're going to have to excavate the subfloor to create proper ventilation and stop spore proliferation. I did that once in Amadurhapura, he said, referring to his former job in the ancient capital of Ceylon. There's just a lot of information. That's what I was finding in the beginning, and maybe this is just unavoidable when you start off a book and you're trying to establish the world and the characters, but there was a lot of what felt like info dumping and long sort of clunky sentences that were trying to give you so much information, and I was getting bored. I just wasn't getting into it. I was finding too much giving me information and not enough story. Even the blurb doesn't really sell it to me anyway, which is Cinnamon Gardens Nursing Home is nestled in the quiet suburb of West Grove, Sydney, with residents with colourful histories, each with their own secrets, triumphs and failings. This is their safe place. But this ordinary neighbourhood is not without its prejudices. The serenity of Cinnamon Gardens is threatened by malignant forces more interested in what makes this refuge different rather than embracing the calm companionship that makes the place home to so many. And so I'm getting the feeling that someone is going to challenge this retirement village, and that there'll be obviously very much a racist element, which wouldn't surprise me because Australia has, unfortunately, a history of racism and ongoing racism in various contexts. And I don't mind reading about that in literature, but even the blurb, and I'm worried about the tone and the style, is making it feel preachy to me and sort of as if it's a book about an issue, which rather than just telling me a great story. I'm not getting the good story as yet. And I'm also just getting from the blurb that we're here to talk about racism, which is, very much valid. But if it's not going to be a great story, then I'd rather take in that information or those points of view in non-fiction. So that's always an interesting debate to talk about. And some books, it just tread that line beautifully. So Amanda is reading this and she said she's not minding it. And we were planning to do it on the podcast. So what I might have to do is go back and read a bit more to see if I get into it. And by just the way I'm saying that I'm dreading going back into it, which is always the sign to me that I need to bail on a book. But I wanted so much to love it that I want to give it a chance. So here we are. I will report back. Let me know if you've read it. I know that I'm not doing it justice, but this is just where we got to, page 20 or something like that. So I will give it another chance. Now, meanwhile, what also prompted me to put that down was I started Wifedom by Anna Funder, and I'm still early days, so I won't say much now, but I absolutely loved it from page 1. Her writing is so strong, so clean, and so unadorned, and just really I find so compelling. And this is about George Orwell's wife, Eileen, and it's also about George Orwell, but it's from such an interesting point of view where Anna Funder is writing essentially what could be just a biography of Eileen, but in fact she does part of it as a fiction. So there's almost within this book a novel from Eileen's point of view where she's imagining Eileen's life, but very sticking as close as she can to the facts. And also interspersed with that is Anna Funder, almost a memoir of Anna Funder's life and her, just putting into context in the modern day, wifedom, as the title suggests, and this condition of being a wife, and particularly in the case of Eileen, having a famous husband or a successful husband or a husband who's very demanding. And it's so interesting. Her take on it is really fresh and interesting, and also very nuanced, because Anna Funder loves George Orwell's work. So we get all of that, but her writing is really, she doesn't waste a word. It's very robust. She's so intelligent and well-read, and I'd highly recommend it. I'm only up to page 150 or so, but can't wait to get back to it. So that's the other reason that I did put down Chai Time, because you know when you pick up a book and it's really something that you're enjoying and you just want to keep reading it. And that's what I'm looking for. So there we are. That's Wifedom. That will be more in a September wrap-up, but that's what I'm up to now. Let me know what you've been reading, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.